Welcome everybody. This is our third Learn by Lived Experience event. It's one of a series that we have been doing. And it's based around that the most powerful learning experiences come from hearing directly or reading about other people's lived experiences. So we're really fortunate and delighted to welcome Salli Pilcher this morning, who's an Associate Director of Nursing. I think that's the right title, for the ICC and Community Care Group. Salli has over 30 years nursing experience, and so we're really delighted she's been able to join us today, because we know you've been in high demand, including being on the cover of the Nursing Standard. I'm going to hand over straight to you, Salli, to talk a little bit about your experience, and then if people have questions, if you'd like, there'll be an opportunity at the end to ask those, or you can pop them in the chat box and I'll pose those to Salli at the end. So over to you, Salli.
That's brilliant, thanks, Kath. So as Kath said, yeah, I'm Salli Pilcher. I'm a mum, I'm a wife, a daughter, Associate Director of Nursing here in North Cumbria. I'm a district nursing background, 25 years of working in community services and another 5 in inpatient services. I'm a Queen's nurse. I'm also a member of the Community Nursing Committee, and I'm also a long COVID sufferer. A functional long hauler, which was the phrase that I think is determining my sort of situation today. And I wasn't the fittest woman in the world. I've got back problems on and off throughout the years, but I was an active woman before I got COVID. I played lots of golf in our scratch team, enjoyed walking, cycling, and generally being an active mum to a teenage son. In March 5 years ago, just to give you a flavour, we were enjoying a full week of full-on activities at centre parks, swinging through trees, etc. 4 years ago, I'd been on the golf course all day with the girls. 3 years ago in March, I just completed a 6-mile mountain bike trail around Sherwood Pines. And 2 years ago, I just finished an 8.5-mile hike in the mountains around home in Eskdale. But in March last year, I caught COVID. And it started off really as a mild infection, but by day 7, I felt as though I'd been hit by a bus. I wasn't admitted to hospital, but I had a temperature in excess of 39 degrees. I had a cough, was breathless, and I had widespread muscle and joint pain. At times, sitting to stand was a struggle, and one day I was stuck on the floor for 90 minutes with my back in spasm. Walking was really painful and very limited due to breathlessness and fatigue. And I was isolated, felt very frightened, I was anxious, and I had an overwhelming sense of guilt at not being with my team at the start of the pandemic. I know now that as a middle-aged woman, a little bit overweight, or quite a lot overweight, with 5 or more symptoms in the first week, that there was a strong possibility that I would develop what was now known as long COVID. But at the time, none of that was known. I was a statistic. Somebody referred to me as a benchmark in a world of unknown. So right from the start, I had really, really good support from my GP, from our occupational health team, and from our trust physio. I was probably one of the lucky ones in a world where it was becoming impossible to access primary care. My GP was so concerned that she rang me every other day. And my physio gave me exercises to do over the phone, and the occupational health nurse was absolutely amazing. I was on a strong cocktail of drugs right from the beginning: diazepam, codeine, then gabapentin, cocodamol and naproxen. On day 12, I was given a PCR test, and when it came back negative, despite all my healthcare professionals saying they were convinced it was a false negative, the guilt and fear that my peers, my colleagues, my manager would not believe me was overwhelming. My presentation at the time was not typical. It wasn't typical of the emerging symptoms of COVID, but we know now that joint and muscle pain are all part and parcel of COVID symptoms, and that the virus can exacerbate previous conditions. But we didn't know that back then, and that left me really vulnerable and feeling very vulnerable. I had a return to work plan. It was really good, sensible, and I tentatively returned to work at week 5. Not because I was well enough, but because I felt I had to. But that was a pressure and an expectation I'd put on myself. I was advised not to drive too far, to have flexi start times as required, and to work from home where possible. But I was also a senior nurse and needed to be visible and accessible, and I put a lot of pressure on myself to do that. I think it's fair to say that I'd struggled emotionally and physically for the next few months. Probably still am to a certain extent. I was in pain. I was using a TENS machine at work. I had overwhelming brain fog. I was breathless. I had days of awful fatigue, especially in the morning and evenings. I was anxious, emotional, like I've said, and I was exhausted. I wasn't sleeping for the pain. I was still on a whacking great dose of 3,600 milligrams of gabapentin, naproxenagram, codeine and paracetamol. And looking back there, now I probably shouldn't have been at work. It's all a bit of a fog. They're a bit of a blur the first few months into summer. And whilst I got really good support from my family and friends and my immediate colleagues and team, not all of them really understood what I was going through. I tried to be the best mum, really pushing myself every day to do normal things. And I look back at pictures of those months and see someone smiling back at me, but subtle things show the challenges. Walking poles on a short walk, riding in a buggy on the golf course, when I would join for a few holes just to keep me sane with my son and my hubby. But behind the smile was pain, exhaustion, and a knowledge that not long afterwards I'd be home crumpled up in a heap of pain and not be able to put one foot in front of the other. On work days I was in bed by 7:30, and that was like that for months. And I was actually getting worse rather than better, more fatigued, more pain, less sleep, more anxious. And we were also going through a restructure at work, and I was determined I would be not seen as not coping. I've always been strong, capable and determined, and I didn't want to fail. And I was draining every ounce of resilience I had to keep going. I'd yet to learn about pacing. I thought recovery would come from pushing myself, but it was doing just the opposite. So my back pain eased, but it left me with horrendous nerve pain down my right leg. And that was really weird sensations, deep, relentless bone pain, pulsing, burning pain, and also at times feeling that there was water pouring from my knee, to a point where on more than one occasion I've actually sort of taken my trousers down to make sure there wasn't water pouring out of my knee. Pain was at its worst at night. It was sleep depriving, and if I sat for too long or was active for too long, it went into overdrive. So my GP, my occupational health nurse and physio were all reading around the subject, as was I, and they kept telling me I had post-COVID myalgia and fatigue. The phrase long COVID had not been introduced at that stage. I read as much as I could. They kept sending me articles, but they often related to things like ME or MS or other neurological post-viral effects. There was one study in Canada on health workers following the last SARS outbreak that related to what I was experiencing, but it was like trying to piece together one of those perspex jigsaws that has no picture, and you're trying to fit the pieces together to make sense of what. I had a full MRI of my hip, my spine, my knee. I had an orthopaedic review, but there was no cause for my nerve pain other than post-COVID myalgia. All my bloods came back negative, but on the 20th of June, Occupational Health called me for my antibodies test, and it came back positive. So at least I had one answer. I had had COVID, and that was really important. After reading one article around post-infection immune response and talking to a close physio colleague about her experience of rheumatoid arthritis, which she said was similar to the symptoms that I was experiencing, I spoke to my GP and asked if she'd test me for RA and consider a short, sharp course of steroids might help. But she did the blood test, but asked me to find out more evidence about steroids and long COVID. And when I challenged her, I broke down in tears and said, there isn't any evidence. And she just inferred my anxiety was exacerbating my symptoms. And when I asked for a medication review to try and control my pain anymore, she just said there was nothing more she could add and to try TENS. And that kind of left me at breaking point. It kept me feeling, I didn't know where to go. So I started then to look for alternatives. and I'd been desperate for my sport and holistic therapist to start work again. She'd been my go-to person with my back issues over the years, and she always fixed me. But she was isolating in a husband who had a long-term condition and was very COVID frightened as well. So I kept messaging her, and eventually she offered me an alternative. She offered me socially distanced one-to-one Tai Chi lessons outside. And you know, at the end of the day, what could I lose? That was turning point in my recovery, number one. I'm sure you're all aware that Tai Chi is an ancient internal martial arts, slow movement with intention and with many health and well-being benefits. Not least because my outside classroom was in a garden overlooking Wasdale, Scawfell and Great Gable. She introduced me to meditation and helped me to quieten everything down. And I still have one-to-one sessions with her each week now, as well as joining her Zoom group on a Sunday. The benefits are difficult to explain in a sentence, but it's like reprogramming your body, resetting the norm and calming everything down. Spending time in Wasdale, which is only 10 minutes from home, thankfully, reconnected me with the outdoors and led to another turning point in my recovery. A family staycation picnic with our inflatable kayak, which I couldn't physically sit in because of the pain, led me to swim in the lake alongside my nephews and my son. It was cold, but within a few minutes I realised that my body felt different. It decompressed, the pain had disappeared, and my body felt supported. It was just amazing after feeling 9 months of experiencing 5 months of near constant pain. So I came back home after a few days, and after feeling the benefit, and it actually lasted a few days, I had another tentative swim, and then tongue-in-cheek, I posted on Facebook, did any of my crazy friends fancy trying wild swimming? One of my colleagues and now a very close friend, Zoe, replied yes. And I typed back when, and she said, I'm switching the iron off, I'll see you in 15 minutes. So we did, and fast forward, well, it's now 14 months, we've swum 3 times a week right through winter in the deepest lake in England. Again, like Tai Chi, I could wax lyrical about the evidence base and the literature around cold water wild swimming, improving stamina, core stability, muscle tone, mindfulness, decompression of joints, exercise with low anaerobic threshold, nerve calming, but most importantly, it works for me. The pain subsides usually for a few hours, up to a couple of days, and the mindfulness and feeling of well-being is overwhelmingly positive. Even after some of our most brutal swims, we're now, and I mean brutal swims, in the middle of a storm or in a snow shower or a hailstone, we're now swimming well over a mile 3 times a week. And last month I achieved my COVID goal that I set last year of swimming the length of Wastwater, 3.1 miles. At one of my physio appointments in late August, after hearing the benefits that Tai Chi and swimming were having, my physio tentatively suggested referral to the physical health psychology persistent pain team. Tentatively, because she didn't want me to feel as though she thought my pain was all in my head. She felt it could offer me more tools to add to the belt of things that could tone down the nerve pain and help me cope with the uncertainty of what I was feeling, like running an endurance race without a finish line, what was now becoming increasingly labelled as long COVID. The service had just come into my now revised portfolio, and I made contact with the CD of the service and discussed what she thought. She was really enthusiastic and said she had a senior psychological therapist with a professional an interest in the long emerging COVID agenda, and Occupational Health could arrange me a referral into the service. That was breakthrough number 3. Our session started, and number 1 lesson was why things hurt. She sent me lots of reading, lots of stuff initially was too simple, didn't relate to long COVID, often related to other long-term conditions, and some of it felt a bit basic, but she recognised that, and it always came with those caveats. One TED talk that I could really relate to was by Laura Mosley, Why Things Hurt and How your brain remembers pain. It's a fantastic TED talk, and it's really funny. She listened to me, she believed me, she coached me, she encouraged me, and challenged me, and we had a lot of debates during our sessions together. Lesson number 2 was a revelation: pacing. Pacing is everything. I had been pushing myself hard to drive my improvement, but what I needed to have done all along was to pace and pace some more. I kept an activity journal and started to understand what I could do and what I couldn't do. I found out that pacing is really hard when you're competitive and as driven as I am. She shared professional webinars with me that were coming through the long COVID route. She helped me deal with my anxiety of failing. She kept saying, what are you going to fail at, Sally? Why do you feel you're failing? And I just wanted to beat this thing. And she helped me to lower my emotional mask. She unleashed me, really. I talked about my feelings. I then started to talk about my feelings with my family and friends. I opened up to my hubby, my son, my mum. I was honest at work, which unlocked a huge amount more support, especially from my close team. And I started to be more honest on social media. I opened up on Facebook and Twitter about my long COVID, sharing the good days, the bad days, and the really shit days, because there have been some. Excuse my language. I found a new GP because my other one had left. Someone who'd come into my practice and who'd worked with before. Again, she was another game changer. She believed in me, but she was also clued up on the emerging nice guidance and was willing to take risks. The first consultation with her was the end of a surgery, and she gave me an hour of her time. She took my blood, she requested CT scans of my chest and echo, and because of my unresolved doubt that the pain in my leg had been a result of a blood clot, she arranged a USS of my ultrasound scan of my femoral vein. I asked if she'd check my vitamin D. All of it came back apart from my vitamin D, which I was sufficiently deficient in. So 20,000 units 3 times a week were prescribed. She introduced an inhaler, and then she suggested a short, sharp course of steroids. No evidence base, but she'd read it might be useful. And whilst there were no measurable metrics, she thought it'd be worth a go. I shared my story about the previous ask with her, and she just shrugged and said she was a GP coming up to retirement. And whilst we could only evaluate the subject, only evaluate it subjectively, it was worth a go, worth a shot. And that gave me a huge boost. At first, it was like every single symptom of COVID had come back. My joints ached and so did my muscles. But by the end of the week's course, the nerve pain had been turned down several notches. So early in 2021 was another turning point. One of our respiratory physios, who now heads up the long COVID clinic, contacted me on Twitter. She sent me articles on anaerobic threshold, how to assess whether you're breathing correctly. You know, I'd wrongly assumed that because I've been breathing for 48 years, I was maybe doing it right. How wrong was I? And she gave me an hour of her personal time. We spent time chatting on Zoom, and she told me I had breathing pattern disorder, hence the air hunger that I was experiencing, and suggested I ask my team for a formal referral into the long COVID clinic for lung function tests, which I did, and I got, you know, a full assessment, which was fantastic. So I went away at that point and I wrote a plan on a page, underpinned by a more detailed plan for each of these aspects. It was about breathing, about heart rate, about sleep, about exercise, pain, pacing, fatigue, medication, work, investigations, what my drive, my soothing and my threat triggers were, my emotions, my short to medium term goals, and acceptance. My following consultation with my GP involved me again at the end of a surgery, spreading out my plans on her couch in a treatment room and talking through it step by step. And she thanked me for helping her retire on a high. My psychological therapist sent me some homework in February, and I had to send an email or set up a survey monkey for family and friends to ask them what I'd done well in my long COVID recovery, what positive progress they had noticed, and what I could have done better. I left it to the last day of the 3 weeks that I had to do it in. I wasn't really sure I was ready for the response. I think I was a bit afraid, but it was overwhelming, the response. I sent it out within 24 hours. I had 6 pages of feedback, and I draw on that every day that I'm struggling. So where am I now? Well, I've swum right through winter, in the dark, in the snow, in the ice, in the wind, in the rain, and it's exhilarating. My swim buddy is an amazing close friend now, and she also has fibromyalgia and gets significant benefit from the cold. So we're actually rehabbing together. The only complaint I've got now is it's far too warm in the lake during summer, and we have to swim for much longer to get any benefit at all. A few months ago, I knocked my leg while I was swimming in Devonwater on a rock, and the nerve pain went into overdrive. It was completely disproportionate to this little scratch that was on my leg. And I had to check my leg was still attached to me. It was that bad. No, I'm only joking, but it was really significant. And it was at that point I remembered that TED talk about from Lorna Mosley and why things hurt. At that point, I just started laughing. I breathed and I taught my brain into a more sensible approach to the pain that it was telling me I was experiencing. And that's the way that the whole persistent pain service had helped me to deal and tone down the pain. Yes, I still need medication, but I need less of it now. So Tai Chi continues in the open air classroom. I'm getting more benefit the deeper I get into this ancient practice. My sleep's improved thanks to meditation, and on the whole, my pain is controlled. Yes, I'm still on lots of medication, but a lot less than what I was. After one failed attempt to reduce my gabapentin, which resulted in me going cold turkey because I went at it too fast, I've managed to get that down to 300 milligrams 3 times a day. And so long as I don't sit for too long, or stand for too long, or do too much exercise, or do too little exercise, then all's good. I still struggle to pace. I'm competitive. I want to beat this thing. But thankfully, the boom and bust scenarios are getting less as I learn to live with the symptoms of the chronic fatigue. I have a standing desk. I'm standing at the moment, and that was an absolute game changer. And I've also got a specialist chair, which has made all the difference. And at lunchtime, I try and walk with colleagues. I continue my post-journey recovery on social media and have been able to help others suffering from long COVID, even if everyone's experience is different, even if it's only by listening to others or signposting them to other services. I joined a great focus group run by Doctors in Distress that connects nurses with long COVID from around the country for reflective discussion and support. And I think we're really lucky in North Cumbria to have such well coordinated long COVID services, but it's not the same elsewhere. And I've heard stories from other nurses who've been left to flounder in other trusts, especially in the big cities, and they've not had the support from Occupational Health and still at home, and some are losing hope. So driving's still difficult. It's a fixed position, and the action of using the foot on the accelerator is problematic. It sends my nerves into stimulation, but I'm working on desensitising those. A top tip from a neurophysio who swims with us occasionally. Biking's still off the agenda. It raises my anaerobic threshold way too high, way above 180 beats a minute. So not advisable. But paddleboarding is on, only for very short periods, as the nerve in my right leg go off on one, but it's good for stability, and hopefully that'll help with the driving as well. I'm back playing golf again, but with a buggy. I have to accept that I have to have a buggy like the old ladies. And I need to build in a rest day afterwards, as I'm still really tired. A couple of weekends ago, we went on an overnight Christmas break that my mum had bought us. We left it till September to go, thinking I'd be much better, but actually it took 2 weeks to recover from those 2 rounds of golf on consecutive days. I've been discharged from all the services, and I stay well plan. I've got a stay well plan. I've got my plan on a page, and I've got my crafting and cooking, which are my soothing activities that bring me joy without expending that cognitive and physical energy. I know I'm making progress, but sometimes I do need to stop and reflect at just how far I've come, but I'm not there yet, and I'm still frustrated. It feels less like completing that perspex jigsaw with no picture to guide you, but it still feels like a long distance marathon without a finish line. In recent weeks, I've been struggling to come to terms with the fact that now 18 months on, I may be left with these symptoms, and that the nerve pain, the myalgia and the fatigue may be long term. I think the last conversation with my GP was, you're at a stable level with your medication. This could be indefinite. That's really hard. And that makes me feel really, really emotional. But I'll beat it. I will. So I've still got the tools in the box and I need to use them. Sometimes I forget to use them and I feel myself slipping back. But I've not got to let my routines or the activities let them slip, because when I do, the pain and the fatigue is not far behind them, and that's the frustrating bit. So my top tips to deal with long COVID would be to be honest, ask early for help, make reasonable adjustments for staff in your team if they're suffering from long COVID, and talk openly about the challenges. They're going to need a phased return that's longer than normal. They're going to need shift patterns that accommodate fatigue, boom and bust. Keep an activity diary, or encourage people to keep an activity diary. Know what triggers are to feeling good, or the bits that result in boom, bust and energy drain. Build consistent professional relationships with people who believe you are consistent and who you can build trust in. It's difficult in today's post-COVID world where general practice and services are under so much pressure, but it is still possible. I have a single point, a single GP, and I email her regularly to update her where I am, and we have email communication if I need help. I'll face-to-face or a telephone call if she thinks I need help more than I recognise. Keep an open mind. One size does not fit all. I think there's 250 different symptoms of long COVID, and everyone is different. There will be many tools in the toolkit, and they'll all be needed to be used at different stages in recovery. Mindfulness, breathing and meditation, not medication, well that's useful as well, is the most underrated and powerful tool in the box. Think wider than just the traditional pathways and solutions, be open to trying new things, and pacing and pacing some more. Pushing yourself pushes you further from your destination. So what do I hope from sharing my experience here and on Twitter and on social media? It can be very easy not to share, and I felt quite exposed sharing my experience. I feel quite exposed now, and I've agonised as to whether I'm doing the right thing, and if I'm quiet on Twitter I'm usually having a bad week. I feel anxious now about doing this, but while some people let you know that they disapprove of you sharing your journey, not by what they say but what they don't say, the majority of people have been overwhelmingly positive and encouraging, and the feedback has been fantastic, especially when somebody messages you to say how much you've helped them and how much you've encouraged them to seek help or seek alternatives. I had to navigate my way through the fog for the last 18 months. I had no map, no GPS. I don't want anyone to go through that. And whilst we're getting more geared up for recognising and helping people with long COVID, there are still many gaps, and some people are still floundering out there, not just with long COVID, but with other long-term conditions which are similar, from which we need to use our learning from long COVID to improve and raise those pathways too. I had the benefit of being a senior nurse. I can be assertive. I can access and interpret research. I can hold my own. I can fight for answers. And I've been able to explore options and have the financial means to do so, to access options outside the traditional box. My Tai Chi and my wild swimming journey hasn't been cheap. Swim wetsuits come with a hefty price tag, and I've now got more neoprene than my brother has lycra, and I've got more bobble hats than anyone has shoes. But despite all this, I have felt helpless, despondent, frightened and a failure at times, and I've struggled to make myself heard or believed in the early days. What if I was a 78-year-old woman living isolated at home without the internet? What if I was a middle-aged woman with learning difficulties? What if I was a passive individual, or I didn't know what to ask, who to ask, or was too frightened to ask? Much of the media focuses around people who were once active and in work and are now housebound in wheelchairs on home with oxygen. But that's not always the case. My experience represents the middle ground, the functional long hauler, but it's still a long and lonely haul at times. We need to help our practitioners to listen, to really hear, to recognise the symptoms of long COVID, to know what they can access, know what they can do to help themselves, their colleagues or their patients, and to give them confidence. But I think most importantly, and what I want to get from sharing my journey, is to give long COVID sufferers hope. So that's my story. Zoe's just arrived and smiled at me. Zoe's my swim buddy. And I just have a bit of a screen share that I want to do. Where's my mouse gone? Hopefully you'll all see this. come up yet?
Yep, it's come up, Sally.
So
I
this is
recognise some of those photos.
this is our journey. This is I'm saying our because I can see Zoe there, and I know she's been with me every step of the way since last August, whilst we've been in the lake. So Matthew there, my son, he paddle boarded across the lake with me while I swam. One of the days that Zoe couldn't do. My husband's been there. My mum's walked along the side. There's Kerry, my Tai Chi instructor there, and Zoe, there we are at the bottom. The bottom with the kayak is our journey, our 3.1 miles, one cold summer night in the mist. Yeah, so
thank you, Sally.
That's my story. We still have Winrig at the top of the mountain to do, but that's a couple of years off because I still can't get up a decent hill without my inhaler and without my sticks, and a long way off the top yet. But yeah, so I just
Thank you so much.
Hope that has resonated with some and will help others.
Thank you, Sally. So if anyone's got any questions for Sally, would you mind putting your hands up? But I just wanted to say that, I know you said you're there, you felt exposed. Don't you're among friends. So just remember that you're among friends here. And actually, it's through sharing some of these experiences. It's the very thing that you said at the end is it's so brave to share something so personal, but it's by sharing these experiences that we can start to make a difference for others who may be feeling the same, and others in this trust who are not able to speak or feel able or willing to, and now know how they can perhaps network or get support. So we really do appreciate you coming on, and we will be sharing this as well with people to watch in their own time, people who may not want to actually come and sort of hold the parapet up. So really grateful. So does anybody have any questions for Raj, you've got your hand up. Would you like to go first?
Just want to say well done, Sally, for sharing this because it will remove a lot of bias, ignorance from people's mind about COVID. And your journey was incredible because you started at the time when the medical knowledge about COVID-19 was really poor. You navigated yourself, finding the information and help from colleagues and meditations. It's such an inspiring story. And I'm really proud of you for sharing this.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Raj. I'm getting all emotional, sorry.
Zoe?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to say all of this without being emotional too, Sally, but I want to thank Sally because through her journey, she's allowed me to be honest about my long-term condition. Because long COVID's given much more insight into fibromyalgia. There are a lot of our staff who live alongside with fibromyalgia. This is a brutal condition, same as long COVID, and it's been so great to share it and be honest. I covered up my fibromyalgia for 5 years until I met Sally, and we started swimming together, and she's allowed me to become a little bit more honest and a little bit more open with people about what a daily battle that fibro can give you. So that's amazing. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've had to help Zoe on some of her bad days. I'm sure she won't mind me saying I've had to help her in and out of her wetsuit when she can't get her arms above her shoulders. But by the time she gets out of that lake, boy, can she get those arms up.
And I've been able to be very honest as well, with a bit more honest, but for years my sons have had to dress me because I actually can't get my clothes on in the morning. And, and obviously I've shared my experience and about who my sons are, and that's, I would never told anybody that before, but it's really important that we are that honest about it. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I would recommend, if you haven't seen Zoe's Live by Experience story, it's also available to view on our staff website. So I would recommend that as well. Lisa, do you have a question?
Not really a question. It's just a comment. I have put it in the chat box, but I just wanted to say thank you so much, Sally, for agreeing to do the session. I know we had a long chat about it beforehand, and I think these learning from lived experience sessions are just so powerful and so important to to raise awareness. And Zoe, I'm sure that you will completely and utterly agree with me. We really promoted Zoe's story at Cumbria Pride on Saturday, and it's just fantastic. And I'm so thankful to you, Sally, and also to you, Zoe. Thank you very much.
And do keep an eye on the chat box, Sally, because there's a lot of people put comments in there as well. Sophie.
Hi, Sally. First of all, thank you for sharing as well. I found that really insightful, because I've in a way been fortunate enough to not actually come across too many people that I know personally that have had really bad symptoms with COVID. So I struggle to understand it fully. So hearing your experience has really helped. I just picked up on with you saying about coming back to work, and you were the one that really pushed yourself to come back, and maybe pushed yourself a little bit too soon to do that. Is there anything that you would say to colleagues, or you say to individuals that you yourself will probably manage that are the same as yourself, that really try and push themselves to come back, but maybe come back a little bit too soon? Is there any advice you would give to them?
I think you have to be ready. I think there's a lot of, you can feel socially isolated at home when you're off, especially I mean I did in the early days, because you know there was so much unknown, there was so much fear around it. So people will want to come back. We all work for the NHS because we've got a dedication. We want to work, we want to be at the front line, we want to support our teams, or we want to support our patients, whatever you do. But you've got to give yourself time, because actually if you don't, you end up with something that is much longer term. But I think the thing for me is, if had I known about pacing, I probably would have recovered quicker. So if I hadn't pushed myself in the early days to get back to normal, then I probably would have not drained my energy reserves over those first few months of being back at work.
Yeah, so that kind of links to my question really, which I was going to ask, is that what is it that made you feel put pressure on yourself, and how can we address that as an organisation? Is it a professional thing? Is it a Cumbrian thing? Is it just a human thing? Stiff upper lip? And is there anything that we can do to help improve that going forward, do you think, as an organisation?
I think it's all of those things, Kath. I think it's also an NHS thing. I think it's just that who we are, the makeup of us as individuals who work within the service. I think I think there are discussions going on around the traditional return to work model that doesn't fit with COVID, and that's still emerging. So you know, your 3 weeks phased return for someone who is suffering from long COVID isn't going to work. The other bits that I've picked up from speaking to nurses across the country is that understanding about when they come back in the shift patterns. They're never going to be able to do 3 12-hour shifts when they come back from COVID, or even 3 weeks after a phased return. So give them time, give them a shift pattern that allows them to recover in between. Drinks on duty, you know, with long COVID, you have to keep your fluid and your salt intake up. I mean, for goodness sake, you know, everyone's told you for years that you've got to keep your salt intake down. But with long COVID, there is some emerging evidence to suggest that you need to keep that up. So it's about regular nutrition and hydration breaks, and just understanding the different types of symptoms and how that can trigger in the workplace. Certainly for somebody who's been on Teams for the last 18 months. Yeah, 18 months. My standing desk has been brilliant. I can stand for a long meeting, or I can sit down. I can switch my camera off. I can exercise at my desk. The most embarrassing bit is when I forget to switch my camera off and I start to do some sort of Tai Chi movements, and then people start looking at you a bit funny. But you know, giving yourself permission to do that. So I actually put it in the chat box now. I'm switching my camera off, but I'm still here. I'm just walking around, or I'm exercising and just changing position. I think that it's all bits and pieces. It's about knowing what your own limitations are, keeping your diary, keeping your plan on a page and working with your line manager around those reasonable adjustments, because in that way we can all come back to work, we can make that meaningful contribution that we all crave, but within reasonable limits and adjustments. Does that sound?
It does. It sounds. It does. Raj, have you got another comment to make?
One additional kind of question. Sally, you mentioned about meditation and how it has helped kind of going out swimming and kind of reducing medications. And I think we need to consider speaking to our psychologist colleague from pain services, whether they can provide similar kind of advice even kind of online, because hearing from Sally, it seems that it's a very important, apart from the medication, this is also very important.
It is that the persistent pain service was amazing. It was an amazing journey. It was one that had to be ready to sign up to and ready to accept. But actually, you know, because you think, oh, well, do people think it's all in my head? Well, the way that your brain interprets the signals from your nerves, it gets them all mixed up. And if you can quieten them down just through that breathing and that understanding and that sort of deeper quietness, it does tone them down. It never takes them away. It's not taken them away to date yet. But when it does flare up, if I can get out and just get into that sort of either do a bit Tai Chi, you know, or just that general just quietness can just tone it all down. And it has been, you know, that has been the biggest part, being able to come off quite a horrendous cocktail of drugs that were leaving me with brain fog. I didn't have the answer as to whether the brain fog was due to the long COVID or whether it was due to the gabapentin. I suspect now it's both, because on a day-to-day basis the brain fog is a lot less, but when I get fatigued it comes back very quickly. So it's part and parcel of everything, I think.
Thank you, Sally.
There was a question just
oh, was there? Hold on. I was just going to touch on, someone's talked about communication and sharing the story, so just going to mention that. I think so we have done, Sally, you've done some interviews with the Nursing Standard, haven't you, and been on the front page of that. We have done some press releases, and Sally has done some stuff with us. I think what it'd be good to do is to share this, the link in our COVID bulletins, in terms of if you work with anybody who has long COVID, this is just watch this and look at what you might want to do differently going forward. And of course it's available on our staff website for everybody. So I think that's one of the things that we will definitely do. I'm just seeing,
we've got some great web pages as well. So we've got some stuff on the physical health psychology service and occupational health web pages around long COVID. Yeah. There's also a really good Queen's Nursing Guide for supporting people with long COVID, which is free and accessible for all. And it was just my plan on a page. I did tweet my plan on a page not so long ago. I'll tweet it again.
Yeah, please do. And what's your Twitter handle, Sally?
It's Salli Pilcher NHS.
Salli Pilcher NHS for anyone who wants to follow Sally. There's some people adding things into the chat box saying we've got some spaces left on the mindfulness course that is run by Ian Rigg. I would highly recommend that. And also Lisa's saying that if people need guidance around reasonable adjustments, to drop Lisa an email, and perhaps consider joining the Accessibility and Disability Staff Network, which is where we'll be taking some of these policy things through going forward.
Joanne Glenn Holmes in Occupational Health as well. I sent her the contact for the Doctors in Distress sessions that they were running for nurses with long COVID. They were also they also did some sessions for people that were shielding at home and how difficult that can be. So she's got those details, and they're running those periodically. That's really good because you get to connect with other people. They called me the mum of the group because I was so far forward and I'd got so much of the answers. but actually it helped me significantly as well, because there were things that I hadn't addressed. So as part of those reflective sessions, it wasn't all about me being mum.
Yeah. Well, can I just say thank you very much on behalf of everyone who's joined, and behalf of everybody who'll watch this back. I think it's a really brave thing to do, Sally, and I really appreciate you coming on and doing this. As you said, not everybody is in the same position to be able to share their story as you have done. So we're really grateful for that, and hopefully that will help us change things going forward so we can all be more supportive of people who are suffering with long COVID or other similar conditions. So thank you very much.
And you know, I mean, I'm on Global as well as Twitter. I'm on Global, my phone number's there. If anybody is watching this or does watch this and is experiencing problems and wants just to talk about it with one long COVID sufferer to another, then I'm more than happy to do that as well. Just pick up the phone. Lovely.
Thank you very much. So our next Learn by Lived Experience session is actually in October. We have Johnny Nyaba, who is going to talk about his experience of moving from Cumbria from Ghana to Cumbria. So he's joining us on the 20th. I'm not sure what time it is. Is it a lunchtime, Lisa? And that's
it is, yes, it's 12 till 1.
And that's part of our Black History Month. We'll be sharing stories throughout the month of October. So please join us then. Send this to people that you know who might need it and spread the word. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.